Sansa Stark stood at the prow of the small fishing skiff, her skirts billowing like pale wings around her as the dawn wind lashed her face. Beneath the slate sky, the black water rush unfurled like a ribbon of smoky glass, its surface unbroken, save for the wake left by the single oarsman guiding her boat northward. The silhouette of King's Landing receded into the mists behind her, its towers and battlements no longer her prison, but a distant memory of betrayals so deep they ached in her bones. In their place lay the promise of the Vale, a realm of soaring peaks and verdant glens where her blood still held power. She closed her eyes against the chill, recalling the horrors she had endured within the Red Keep, the cruelty of the Queen Regent, the deranged fantasies of the Mad King's daughter, and the cold intrigue of the court that sought to brand her a traitor for refusing to bend to their will. Yet it was Littlefinger who had given her this chance to break the chains, though his motives remained as tangled as a skein of winter's frost. Petyr Baelish had seen her potential, a Stark maiden tempered by fire, capable of wielding her suffering as a blade. And so, under cover of a storm that had drowned out her cries, she had slipped free, a ghost in skirts and corsetry, out the sally port of the Red Keep and into the rowboat waiting in the flooded courtyard. Now, as the sun began to rise behind the Vale Mountains, Sansa drew a steadying breath. The wind carried with it the promise of pine and the faint echo of mountain streams, a balm to her frayed spirit. Beyond this river lay the Eyrie, seat of House Arryn, where her Aunt Lysa reigned, and where the blood of Lyanna Stark and Jon Arryn mingled in fragile allegiance. It was there that Sansa would stake her claim, not merely as the Lady of Winterfell, as fate and prophecy might dictate in a different world, but as the protector of the Vale itself. In the chaos of King's Landing's fall, she would carve out a new destiny, forging alliances among the mountain lords who saw her as an outsider, rallying the knights who professed fealty to the Falcon Banner, and showing all that the girl who had danced at court could also wield command. The oarsman glanced back at her, his weathered face inscrutable beneath a soaked hood. "Lady Sansa," he said softly, voice rough with river water and fear. "We approach the Brazen Ford. Beyond that, you'll find the main road to Gulltown." "Now." Sansa inclined her head, the motion almost imperceptible in her stiff collar. "Thank you," she answered, her voice steadier than she felt. The oars dipped again, and the boat slipped beneath the crumbling arch of the ford. Stones lay slick with algae, the river shallow here. But even so, the current was strong. The landing was nothing more than a battered quay of driftwood and sun-bleached timbers. No guard stood watch. The Vale was a land of trust among its mountain halls, and strangers passed at will along its roads, though she would learn soon enough that trust was as thin as the mountain air. She stepped onto the quay, boots sinking into the soft earth. Behind her, the skiff drifted away like a white gull, leaving her alone with the morning mist. Sansa gathered the skirts of her dress and walked toward the road, each step echoing on the wooden planks. The forest loomed ahead, pines and birch standing tall like silent sentinels. Somewhere beyond the trees lay the foothills of the Mountains of the Moon, and at their summit the Eyrie, a fortress as high as a spire, carved from living rock. Up there, her Aunt Lysa would judge her. Sansa paused at the edge of the village path. She had no retinue, no guards to accompany her. Only the slender knife concealed beneath her bodice, and the resolve that had been nurtured through years of whispered readings from Maester Luwin's parchments. She remembered his gentle voice as he taught her the lore of the North, the histories of the Starks, and the weight of honor that came with their name. He had fallen in King's Landing, a casualty of the madness that spread through the city. It was his dying counsel that hardened her resolve. "You are a Stark of Winterfell, child. You will endure." She pressed on, following the path through the trees. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for a single cart, and winding, a serpent's back, twisting and turning, until it seemed the path would join the sky itself. Sansa kept her eyes forward, though her mind roamed through memories of the Eyrie. The dizzying heights, the gallery of broken knights, their shattered forms held aloft by iron rods. The cold air so thin it cut like glass. She had never felt safe there, trapped by her aunt's fear of the world below. But now, having tasted freedom, she would show them that fear was the greater enemy. After an hour's walk, The sound of hooves on gravel reached her. A small patrol of 3 riders approached. Cloaks of white and blue clasped at their shoulders, falcon pins gleaming against their leather tunics. The foremost knight pulled his mount to a halt, surveying her with narrowed eyes. "Who goes there?" he demanded, voice echoing in the still air. Sansa halted, rising to her full height. She drew a breath, arranging her face into the calm mask she had mastered at court. "Lady Sansa Stark, daughter of Eddard Stark," she replied, voice clear. "I seek passage to the Eyrie, that I might speak with Lady Arryn." The knight's gaze flickered, surprise catching in his gray eyes. "Sansa Stark," he said slowly, "the wolf girl of Winterfell, vassal to the Arryns in her youth. I would not have thought to see you on this road, milady." "I am no guest of King's Landing, sir," she answered. "I have little time for pleasantries. The realm stands on the brink of war once more. I must speak with Lady Lysa before it is too late." The knight exchanged glances with his companions. Then he bowed low. "My apologies, Lady Sansa. The Lady of the Gates deserves no less than all due honor." He raised his head. "We will escort you to the Eyrie." She inclined her head again and mounted behind him, settling into the saddle. The forest swallowed them, the road climbing steadily. As the ground rose, the air grew thinner, cooler. The pilgrimage from the shore to the sky was a test of endurance. Sansa felt her heart pound in her chest with every upward step. But she did not falter. At her back, the knights, Sir Harold Inkpen, Sir Mace Cockshaw, and Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, fell silent, their mounts snorting through the mist. They cleared the tree line hours later, emerging onto a plateau that yawned below the white walls of the Eyrie. Sansa stared across the vale, the wind tearing at her hair. Far below, Gulltown lay like a scattering of gemstones on the water's edge. Beyond that, the gray cliffs dropped into the narrow sea. Above, the Eyrie spires reached into the clouds, their battlements ringed by pale stone. It was a sight both terrifying and glorious, a testament to the stubborn defiance of the Vale against every threat, from rogue mountain clans to the armies of the south. The patrol rode through the gatehouse, past the twin dragons carved in stone. Guards eyed them warily, but bowed at the sight of Sansa's cloak. They threaded narrow staircases carved into the mountain's side, each step smaller and steeper than the last. Sansa gripped the saddle's pommel, her knuckles whitening, but she did not look down. At last, they emerged onto the Swiftwater Hall. A wide, circular courtyard hewn from solid rock, ringed by parapets. In the center stood a fountain of falcon wings, water tumbling like silver tears. Sansa dismounted, legs trembling, but she held her posture. Ahead, a pair of heavy oaken doors stood open, and beyond them, in a high-ceilinged chamber, she saw the figure she both dreaded and yearned for. Lysa Arryn, the Lady of the Vale, sat upon a dais, her frame slender beneath silken robes of blue and white, her copper hair piled in coils like a maiden's. Her eyes, wide as moon discs, fixed upon Sansa with a lift of her bushy eyebrows. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lysa's mouth twisted into a smile that held more accusation than welcome. "Sansa Stark," she said, voice high-pitched, trembling like a bird's wing. What are you doing here? You were meant to be safe in King's Landing." "Sister," Sansa replied softly, the word chosen with care. "I came because the realm is slipping into chaos. The Lannister Queen will bleed us dry if we do nothing. I have come to offer my services, to lead, if need be, the Vale's forces southward, to hold the mountains for the Starks of Winterfell and the Arryns of the Eyrie." Heat flared in Lysa's cheeks. "You would command our knights? You, whose only war is the one of courtly schemes?" "I have known war," Sansa said, stepping forward. "I have endured its terror. And I have learned that survival demands more than blood and steel. It demands cunning, alliances, resolve. The men of the Vale are loyal, but they lack a unifying purpose. Let me give them one." "Thou." Lysa rose, robes rustling like dry leaves. "You speak of unity. Yet you fled your duty. You abandoned your vow to stand at King's Landing's side. That vow was given under duress, Sansa answered, voice firm. I escaped so that I might serve a greater cause. The Vale stands between the south and the north, between tyranny and liberty. If we do not act, the Seven Kingdoms will tear themselves apart. A silence fell. Then Lysa's lips parted, as though she would speak, but the words dissolved on her tongue. Instead, she pressed her fingertips to the carved armrest of her seat, knuckles white. The chamber felt cold, as if the mountain itself held its breath. Sir Harold bowed his head. My Lady Arryn, he said, the lady speaks true. We have letters from your lords, Grafton, Royce, Templeton. Each declares their houses unstable, awaiting a leader. If Lady Sansa were appointed protector of the Vale, we could unify your banners. Nandamsawa. Lysa's eyes flicked to him, then to the falcon emblazoned on the stone behind her. Beneath her fear of the world, Sansa sensed something else. Love for her dead husband, Jon Arryn, a yearning to keep his realm intact. The delicate rose of madness in her soul trembled with indecision. Lysa began, voice quavering. Then she snapped her fingers, beckoning. Two squires carried in a folded banner of white silk, stitched with a crimson wolf, entwined with a sapphire falcon. They unfurled it before Sansa. Swear the oath, Lysa commanded, and bear this standard. Then swear that you will defend the Vale against all enemies, north, south, east, or west. Sansa knelt before the dais, bowing her head. She extended her hand, palm upward, and Lysa placed the banner across her open palm. The silk felt cool, trembling in her fingers. With steady voice, she spoke the ancient words. I, Sansa of House Stark, do swear to uphold the honor of the Vale, to lead its forces with wisdom and strength, to defend its mountains and its people against all foes, and to preserve the realm of my late husband, Jon Arryn. So long as these mountains stand, my blade shall guard this land, and my loyalty shall be without fail. She rose, holding the banner before her breast. The knights behind her murmured in approval, spurs jangling like distant thunder. Lysa's eyes glistened, nostrils flaring with pride and fear and something unspoken. Then rise, protector of the Vale, Lysa said, voice soft as a snowfall, and may the old gods grant you strength. Sansa lifted her chin, drawing in the icy air. Dawn light filtered through the narrow windows, illuminating the banners entwined wolf and falcon. In that moment, she felt the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. The Vale belonged to her now, not by birth, but by vow. And she would not fail. Behind the stone walls, the mountain winds howled like distant drums, heralding the beginning of a new era. Sansa Stark, once upon at court, a bird in a gilded cage, had become the guiding star of the Vale, its protector and its spear. And as she stepped forward beneath the echo of falcon wings carved in stone, she knew that her true trial had only just begun. The hush of the Erie's night was broken only by the rasp of stone against leather, the patrols making their rounds along the winding walkways, the distant drip of water from the ancient gutters. Within her chambers high in the mountain keep, Sansa Stark sat at a plain oaken table beneath a single flickering lantern, quill in hand and parchment spread before her. Outside her window, clouds scudded past like living beasts, blotting the moonlight, then revealing it again in swift pulses. In this shifting silver gloom, she planned. Her first council had convened at dawn, beneath the arch of the gallery of the moon door. Lysa Arryn had lingered nervously at the edge, glancing down at the ragged woods and sheer drop to the valley floor, while Sansa's knights and a handful of minor lords, Grafton, Royce, Templeton, stood arrayed before her. Their banners bore the familiar falcon on white, yet now entwined with the crimson wolf she had sworn to uphold. She had spoken then of unity, of vigilance, of the threat posed by the Lannisters and the gathering storm in King's Landing. Some had listened, eyes bright with loyalty. Others had studied her with skepticism, measuring her youth against the weight of command. Late last night, She labored over her orders to Sir Harold Inkpen. Patrol should be doubled along the lower roads, scouts dispatched to watch for Lannister movements. Ravens should fly to Winterfell, to Old Town, and beyond, seeking alliances and pledges of support. To Sir Mace Cockshaw, she entrusted the training of new levies. Farmhands and stable boys pressed into service, while Sir Bronn of the Blackwater conducted discreet interrogations of any merchants or travelers bearing rumors. She wrote until the lantern guttered, until ink smudged her fingers, until the words themselves blurred, and at last she laid down her quill and let her head rest on folded arms. Now wake again before dawn. She reviewed her plans by the slow dancing flame. Before her lay maps of the Vale, lines of forests and roads sketched in charcoal. To the north, the Bloody Gate, her first real test. Lannister raiders might seek to slip southward through its narrow pass. To the east, the glittering coast of the Narrow Sea, where merchants could be hired, ships chartered. To the west, the craggy expanse toward the Riverlands, where potential allies under House Tully might be won. And above all, Winterfell, her true home, her heart's desire, where Jon Snow and the Northern Lords awaited word of her fate. A knock at her door pulled her back to the present. "Enter," she called, smoothing her skirts. The door opened wide enough for Lord Royce's steward to slip inside, a slight man with nervous eyes. He bore a letter sealed in deep, green wax. Sansa broke the seal and unfolded the parchment, reading the elegant script of her cousin, Robin Arryn, the boy king educated by her in happier times. His letter was brief. He pledged his sword, though his guard remained uncertain. He requested her guidance in setting his small council aright. "Good. Better than nothing. Inform Sir Harold. Sir Robert Royce has pledged 300 men-at-arms. Dispatch riders to collect them at Runestone within 3 days," Sansa ordered. The steward bowed and withdrew. She rose, stretching arms stiff from hours bent over the table. Drawing a cloak about her shoulders, she crossed to the window. The courtyard below lay deserted. The narrow pathways wound like ribbons through the mountain. Mist pooled at the base of the walls, hiding the land beyond. Somewhere in that mist her enemies plotted, and perhaps her opportunity waited. Her thoughts turned to Lysa. The Lady of the Vale had grown more confident since crowning her protector, but the madness still lingered at the edges. Sansa knew that Lysa's loyalty was fragile, that fear could shift her whims. Today she would call for Lysa's presence in council, and watch her closely. If ever her aunt's agitation flared too dangerous, perhaps even seize control completely. But for now, she would hold the partnership. Lysa provided legitimacy. Sansa provided competence. By the first light of morning, the courtyard brimmed with life. Levies hammered in training grounds, banners snapped in the chill breeze, and the clang of steel rang against shields. Sansa descended the spiral staircase behind Sir Mace, her cloak dragging across worn stone. He led her toward the training yard, where dozens of recruits practiced spear drills under the watchful eye of veteran knights. "See how they hold their lines," he said, voice low. "If trained properly, these lads could stand against any raiding party. Their fear of falling from the cliffs keeps their feet sure." She watched a young spearman flinch at the crash of a training weapon. The veteran beside him barked an order. The boy straightened, chin up. Sansa saw in him the same fear she'd once carried within herself. Fear shaped by terror into resolve. She approached the training master. "Sir Mace," she called. The knights paused, turning to regard their queen, no longer captive, but ruler. Have the men been supplied with proper armor? Many still wear leather jerkins. They need chainmail or padded gambesons before sending them into real battle. The training master bowed. "They are in need, my lady. I worry chains will rust too quickly in this damp air." Sansa nodded. "Then leather-padded gambesons. Commission at the forges below. Send to my chambers for payment, no excuse." He saluted and returned to his men. Sansa studied the recruits. Their attacks were clumsy but earnest. They lacked the strength of seasoned warriors, but they held their line. She would send the best of them south with Sir Bronn to reinforce the Bloody Gate, while retaining enough to defend the mountain passes. Behind her, Sir Harold approached, dusty from the roads. "My lady," he said, bending the knee. "A patrol has spotted a scouting party of 6 at the base of the Bloody Gate. They fled as we approached, but their cloaks bore the red and gold of the rock." Sansa's heart tightened. A Lannister scouting party so deep within Vale borders suggested they sought an intelligence breach, perhaps to locate a weak pass, or test the defenses. She nodded. "Gather 70 men-at-arms," she ordered. "Ride to the gate at once. Let no man pass unchallenged. I want their leader brought here, alive if possible." Harold's grin was feral. "It will be as you command, Protector." In the great hall, Sansa convened her small council. A long table of polished oak bore tokens of alliance. The banner of House Grafton on one side, the Stark wolf on the other, the Arryn falcon carved into the chair at the head. Lord Merritt Grafton, a stout man with a lumbering gait, sat opposite her, quill and parchment at hand. He bowed stiffly. "My lady, the southern road remains unguarded for 3 miles. We have scouts there," Sansa cut in. "But I will send more. I will ride to meet you on the morrow, Merritt, to inspect those defenses myself." He blinked. "Your ladyship, you should not." "I will," she said, her gaze steel. "No defensible pass matters more than the one I know best." She paused, letting her words settle. This council would learn that her decisions were not to be questioned lightly. Lysa Arryn sat at the end of the table, eyes wide, fingers entwined in her lap. "Lady Lysa," Sansa addressed her kindly, "I would have your judgment. The Lannister party sought to test our walls. Do you believe they will strike soon?" Lysa's lips quivered. "They will not attempt a full assault," she said, voice trembling. "They know they cannot breach the mountains. But they might seek to undermine us, poison our waters, bribe our lords." "Nan?" Sansa inclined her head. "Then our response must be as cunning as their schemes. We will send ravens to Lord Tully, requesting his assistance in watching the rivers. We will offer guild charters to the merchants of Gulltown, that their ships patrol the narrow sea for reinforcements, and we will seize any Lannister funds held in our banks until hostilities end." There was a murmur of assent. Sir Bronn cleared his throat. "My lady, I have another matter. The recruits. Several have spoken of strange visions among the mountain clans. Tales of giants walking in the high passes, and whispers of an old magic stirring in the old gods' groves." "Now," Sansa's brow furrowed. "Giants? Magic? Those are stories for children's hearths." "Perhaps," Bronn admitted. "But fear can be as dangerous as steel. If the mountain clans believe they face supernatural foes, they might strike at our forces in terror, or even join the Lannisters out of superstition." Sansa let out a breath. "Then we will meet with the chiefs of those clans. I will ride out to the high passes next week, when the riders return. Until then, tell the men to stand firm. And send word to Lady Stark in Winterfell. I have news of allies, and some of dissent. I will need her counsel." "Men?" A hush fell. Even Lysa's eyes softened, as if remembering the daughter she once held. Sansa realized that beyond the politics and the war, she was rebuilding a family torn by grief. Her aunt, her uncle Robin, the Stark bannermen, they all looked to her. This girl who had been broken and remade like Valyrian steel. That night, before the hearth in her solar, Sansa sat by the fire, hands folded in her lap. Maester Vaughn, one of the few retainers not replaced since Jon Arryn's passing, brought her a cup of spiced wine. "You seem tired, my lady," he observed, voice gentle. "I am," she admitted. "But there is no rest for those who hold the veil." He offered her the wine. "Mind your health. The work you do is vital, but so is your strength." She drank, the warmth spreading through her. "Thank you, Maester." Soon, I hope, this war will end and we can rebuild." He sighed. "The 7 kingdoms are fracturing, my lady. It may be your duty to see that they are put back together." "I will do my part," she said. "But I worry for the north. My brother Rob. His campaign stalls in the Riverlands. Our banners march, but winter approaches. I fear the south rallies faster than we can." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have the heart of a Stark. You will endure." She gave a small, sad smile. "Endurance is not victory, Maester, but I will endure." The next morning, Sansa rose before dawn and rode out with Sir Harold and a troop of knights toward the Bloody Gate. The path was narrow, hugged between sheer rock faces, the wind howling through the pass like an angry spirit. She wore armor at last, a breastplate etched with the wolf and falcon, a sword at her hip that felt both foreign and right. Each step of the horse's hoofs echoed her thundering heart. At the gate, they found the Lannister scouting party holed in an old guard tower. Its door had been battered, the walls churned with hoof tracks. Harold led the charge, men clashing with cloaked riders whose red cloaks gleamed like blood in the dim light. Steel rang on steel. Cries rose, and Sansa watched from the flank. When the fight ended, 3 Lannister knights lay bound, their mounts restless. She dismounted and approached their leader, a grim-faced man of broad shoulders. She looked into his golden eyes and saw surprise. "You are far from home, Lord Brax," she said quietly. "Tell me why you penetrated our passes, and I may show mercy." He spat in the dirt. "Mercy? From a Stark? You play at war, girl. I am protector of the Vale," she reminded him softly. "Do not mistake my age for weakness." He looked at her breastplate, then back at her eyes. "Protector? You should have stayed in the Red Keep, little bird." Sansa drew her sword, the blade tilting in the pale sunlight. "You will tell me all you know of Lannister movements, or I will carve the answers from your flesh." He hesitated, hatred and fear flickering across his face. Then he spoke, naming troop movements, supply trains, secret alliances. When he finished, Sansa nodded to Harold. "Bind him well. He rides with us to the Eyrie. There, I will decide his fate." Menenawa. Back within the safety of the mountain fastness, Sansa convened again with Lysa and her council. The captive lord stood in chains at the end of the hall, head bowed. Sansa reported what she had learned. The Lannisters would send a force to seize the Val's passes if the crown so ordered. They might strike as soon as the next fortnight. Lysa shuddered. "Then we must strike first," she whispered. A murmur ran through the hall. Sansa held up a hand. "We will send ravens to Winterfell and to King's Landing," she declared. "We will call for a great council, all our lords and the northern bannermen, to meet at Runestone in 1 month's time. There we will decide our course. Ally with the north against the south, or stand neutral and hold the Vale alone." Sir Mace frowned. "That gives the Lannisters time to gather. It also gives us legitimacy," Sansa said. "A great council binds lords under oath. Our enemies will think twice before striking a realm united." Lord Grafton leaned forward. "And if the Lannisters do not honor that? If the Hand orders them south anyway? Then we fight," Sansa said, eyes blazing. "And we win." In the days that followed, the Vale transformed. Governors collected taxes to fund the armies. Forges roared with new steel. Merchants from Gulltown sent ships to patrol the narrow sea. Sansa dispatched ravens carrying invitations embossed with her seal. She met with the chiefs of the mountain clans beneath a ring of old oaks, listening patiently to their stories of giants and gods, until she found a way to bind them with promises of land and trade. She quelled a minor rebellion in the Finger, where House Waynwood chafed under her authority, by touring their castles, sharing tables with the bannermen, and winning their respect through courtesy and diplomacy, rather than force. And always she returned to the Eyrie to counsel with Lysa, guiding her through the fits of fear and paranoia. When Lysa woke screaming in the night, convinced the stone walls would crumble, Sansa was there to soothe her, reciting the old songs of Winterfell, of the Starks who had endured the long night. When Lysa's papers fell into disarray, Sansa reorganized them, teaching her aunt the discipline of governance. Through it all, Sansa changed. The girl who had once trembled before Cersei's mocking smile now walked the halls with purpose. The lady who had been groomed for court intrigues had become a commander, a diplomat, a protector of an entire realm. In the dungeons beneath the Eyrie, the captured Lord Brax swore his loyalty under threat of torture, and later came to admire her resolve. Tales of her deeds spread down the mountain roads to Gulltown and beyond, reaching even the ears of King's Landing. Whispers spoke of the young wolf who tamed the Vale, of the maiden who would not be broken. At twilight on the eve of the Vale's great council, Sansa climbed to the highest battlement of the Eyrie. Before her lay the red-gold horizon where sky met earth, and below, the valley's haze shimmered like molten metal. In the distance she saw the banners of arriving lords, white falcons, black moles, green fish, and the proud gray towers of House Stark rising from the mists of the neck. Behind her, the wind carried the clanging of armor and the soft murmur of prayers to the old gods and the new Adi. She donned her helm, its crest a wolf and falcon entwined. In her hand she held the banner she had sworn upon, the banner of protector, of unity, of hope. In her heart, she carried the memory of Winterfell, the teachings of Maester Luwin, the honor of her father, and the promise of her people. The Vale awaited her decision, to stand with the North or to stand alone. Soon her lords would gather, and history would turn beneath her gaze. Sansa breathed deeply. The risk was staggering. A failed alliance, a shattered realm, the vengeance of the Lannisters unleashed. Yet she felt no fear, only resolve. The wind whipped her cloak, the banners snapped, and the distant horns of incoming riders sounded like a herald of destiny. With a final look at the crimson sky, she raised her banner high and shouted across the battlements, her voice clear and true. Let all who hold this ground know that Sansa of House Stark, protector of the Vale, calls the great council at dawn. We stand together, and together we shall endure. Nah. Below, the banners swirled. The riders lifted their voices in answer, and the Eyrie itself seemed to tremble in acknowledgement. In that echo, she heard the beating of 1,000 hearts, and knew that a new chapter was beginning for the Seven Kingdoms, and for the Wolf Maiden, who had become their guiding star. One now. The first light of dawn stole into the great hall of the Eyrie like a pale promise. Sansa Stark stood at the head of the long, narrow table, her banner, the crimson wolf entwined with the sapphire falcon, draped across the carved oaken surface. The assembled lords and ladies, knights and magistrates, clustered in uneasy groups beneath the vaulted ceiling. Faint shafts of sunlight pierced the narrow windows high above, illuminating motes of dust that danced like spirits in the chill air. Outside, the wind moaned through the mountain passes, as if heralding the reckoning at hand. Sansa's heart thundered, but her face was calm steel. She swept her gaze across the assembled. To her left stood Lord Merritt Grafton, his bulk filling the bench as if to say, I am here, and I bring my men. To her right knelt Lord Robert Royce, gaunt of cheek and grim of visage, yet loyal. Beyond them sat Lady Anya Waynwood of Ironoax, eyes sharp as hogs, and Lord Hoster Tollet, who had come down from the high passes on the promise of fair trade. At each place a banner hung, the green trout of Tully, the black bear of Mormont, though Jeor Mormont's absence was keenly felt, and even the ivy-wreathed stag of Baratheon from the Stormlands, sent by a restless Lord Stannis. Welcome, Sansa began, her voice carrying through the hall. You come from many shores and high places, summoned in peril and hope both. I have called this council because our realm teeters on the edge of ruin. The Lannisters marshal their forces to the south, the Riverlands burn, and the North's banners stall in the mud. We alone hold these mountains as the shield of the realm. Speak now of your counsel that we may bind ourselves together before the tide breaks. A hush followed. Then Lord Merritt Grafton rose, the scrape of his boots on stone echoing sharply. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. My lady, the Vale is rich in passing trade, but our coffers shrink under Lannister cuts. I propose we open our ports at Gulltown and White Harbor to northern fleets, granting them safe harbor for their ships, in exchange for arms and provisions. Let the sea become our ally?" Murmurs of assent rose. Sansa inclined her head. "A sound proposal. I will dispatch orders to the captains in Gulltown and White Harbor. Let them prepare to welcome the northern freighters. Lord Royce." Robert Royce's lean form reached upward. "My lady, my men have ridden as far as the Neck. They found the host of House Bolton. No true Stark bannermen anymore, but also saw signs of Robb Stark's forces drilling in the foothills. I believe an envoy to Winterfell could secure an alliance, but travel through the Neck is perilous. I pray your protection could extend to that envoy. I pray your protection could extend to that envoy." Sansa met his eyes. "I will ride with my cousin and ensure our banners travel safely." Turning to the assembled, she made her proclamation. "I, Sark, protector of the Vale," silence answered. Then Lady Anya stood. "There is rumor among my people of dark rites in the Mountains of the Moon, where the blood of giants seeps into the stones. Those clans may rise in superstition to plunder our roads if we send troops through their lands. I move we send gifts, horses, silver, grain, to the chiefs of the high clans, that they may stand fast rather than fall into fear." Menshawar. Again, voices rose in support. Sansa nodded, committing the measure to memory. "Gifts and envoys to the high clans. We shall not shed Clegane blood when a gift of grain can buy their silence." At the far end, a young knight in battered mail rose with hesitation. Sir Merrick Grey of the Cornfield. His voice trembled. "My lady, I beg pardon, but some of my men have spoken of a Lannister force marching through the Vale. Not south but west, aiming to cut us off from the Riverlands entirely. If that be so, our alliances may be too late." Sansa's lips curved wryly. "Then we must strike at them before they strike at us." She turned to Sir Bronn. "Gather your best rangers, 20 men, and harry their flanks. Let no Lannister march uninterrupted through our passes." Bronn inclined, steel glinting. "You command, Protector." A sudden hush fell when the great oaken doors swung open, and 2 guards led Lord Lucius Brax, his wrists in rough manacles, into the chamber. His eyes flitted from Sansa to Lysa Arryn, horror and grudging respect mingling in his gaze. The echo of his chain struck the hall. Sansa's voice rang clear. "Lord Brax, you stand accused of trespass and espionage against the Vale. What have you to say in your defense?" He met her gaze with defiance. "I am a Lannister bannerman on the King's orders. My orders: test your defenses, probe your loyalty, and if the realm should fracture, take the passes in the name of the crown." "Nah." Shock rippled through the hall. Lysa Arryn huddled on her bench, hands clutching her ivory falcon scepter. Sansa held up a hand. "Then, it is settled. The Vale stands not for the corruption of the throne, but for the welfare of the realm. Lords and ladies, will you join me in declaring the Vale's banners for the North and for the free 7 kingdoms? Or will you yield to the crown's tyranny?" Bendo. One by one the banners dipped in assent. The Mormont Bear, the Manderley Merman, the Hornwood Elk. When Lord Stannis Stagg nodded, a low cheer swelled, trembling with the weight of newfound alliance. Lysa Arryn wavered, her face pale. Sansa stepped to her side and laid a gentle hand on her aunt's arm. "You have sworn fealty to me, Lysa. Will you swear that oath before the realm, as I intend to do?" Menentshund. Tears gleamed in Lysa's eyes, but she lifted her chin. "I swear it," she whispered, "by the mother's mercy and the father's justice. I pledge the Eyrie and the Vale to Lady Sansa's leadership." A roar broke from the courtiers, and Sansa felt the tremor of history shifting underfoot. She raised her voice so that every ear could hear, every heart could feel. "Then let it be known that the Vale stands with Winterfell." Let the horns be sounded in the passes. Let the ravens fly to north and south, and let all who value freedom and justice rally beneath our banners. We ride not for conquest, but for the survival of the realm. Namnero. In that moment, the great hall erupted, a cacophony of cheering voices, creaking chairs, and the clash of steel on shields. Sansa let their fervor wash over her, knowing that the true work had only begun, forging alliances, mustering armies, and facing the wrath of the Lannisters. Yet she felt no fear, only clarity. The Vale, once isolated and timid, had found its heart in her courage. Outside, the mountain wind whipped through the open windows, carrying the sound of banners unfurling on the battlements above. Beneath the soaring spires of the Eyrie, Sansa Stark, protector of the Vale, looked upon a realm united in purpose, and knew that the spring of hope had finally unfrozen. Thus began the march of 1,000 banners toward King's Landing's gates, a tide of northern wolves and mountain falcons converging upon the cruel heart of the South. And at its vanguard would ride the girl who had once fled in terror, now tempered by fire, into a leader the 7 kingdoms would remember for all ages to come. Ka. Gandao. Ndao. The dawn broke pale and cold, veiling the Eyrie in a silvery haze that clung to battlements and battlements alike. Sansa rode out at first light, the wind riffling through her dark hair beneath the helm that bore the entwined wolf and falcon. At her side rode Lady Anya Waynwood, bribed into allegiance by promises of new trade routes and the chance to reclaim Ironowak's former glory. Behind them, a host of 3,000 Vale men-at-arms, knights and levies alike, their banners snapping in the chill gusts. As the column descended the swift-water path, the sheer precipices of the Mountains of the Moon pressed in on either side, and Sansa felt the old thrill of vertigo, tempered now by determination rather than fear. The narrow way, barely wide enough for 3 riders abreast, curved and dropped until below them spread the high glens, gray cliffs softening into green meadows, feathered by pines and birch. Winding streams flashed like silver ribbons, and among the trees she saw smoke rising from the homesteads of mountain clans. She raised a gauntleted hand, halting the riders at the foot of the pass. A dozen scouts slipped ahead into the woods, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Sansa's heart thudded as she awaited their report. In moments they returned. There was no sign of Lannister troops, but the clan chiefs had gathered on a rocky knoll, talismans woven of bone and feathers dangling around their necks. They eyed the host with suspicion, whispers passing among them like wind-borne shadows. "Good," Sansa said softly. "Let them see our swords and know that we do not come to harm. But let us not vex them. Quietly, Sir Harold. Offer gifts." The knight inclined his head and rode forward with 4 horsemen, banners lowered to half-mast in deference. Sansa watched as they presented pouches of grain, bolts of wool, and fine boots forged by the Eyrie's smiths. The chiefs exchanged glances, those lean faces marked with long scars and tribal tattoos. A tall man draped in wolf pelts, chief of the Grey Tongue clan, stepped forward and took a pouch. Then stroking his beard, "Vale lordling," he said in the common tongue, though his accent rasped with mountain echoes. "Your gifts are fair. What ask you in return?" Sansa dismounted and approached, her crimson cloak a banner in the dim light. She knelt and placed her gauntlet on the earth. "Great chief," she said, voice low but clear, "I seek safe passage through your lands, that I may carry word of alliance to the north, and that in turn you might be remembered in the councils of kings. Your name sung in the halls of Winterfell. I ask that your warriors stand aside, neither hindering nor aiding any army that passes this way until our cause is clear." The chief's steel-blue eyes met hers. For long seconds he considered. Then he spat and nodded. "No clan blood shall stain these passes while the wolf and the falcon ride together." He turned to his lords, and they murmured assent, voices deep as the wind in the ravines. At her signal, Harold distributed the gifts, clasped the chief's forearms in greeting, and escorted them to parley. Sansa remounted. Around her, The host heaved in relief. She spurred forward at a trot, feeling the surge of triumph and the weight of responsibility. The clans would not interfere. Now the road to the Neck lay open, and with it, the chance to seal an alliance with Robb Stark. They rode for 2 days through forests of pine and elm, skirting the ridges of the Vale's western edge, until the land flattened into rolling hills and fertile farmlands. Here, the riverlands began to claim the soil, gray-green fields mottled with the red clay of the Trident's banks. Sansa had chosen a discreet route to avoid Lannister patrols, who might assume the Vale host headed south. But in the dawn mist, they encountered only a handful of Tully banners, flying limp beside decayed hedges. Ser Bronn, ever vigilant, guided her to a ruined bridge where the marshy waters of the Tumblestone River ran thick with reeds. Beyond, a mile of gentle pastures led to a walled town, Stone Hollow, as the maester's notes had informed her. Its gates were closed, and its streets empty, save for rats darting among broken carts. A single raven perched upon a crumbling tower, its eye glinting like coal. "This place has known war," Bronn muttered, scanning the rubble. "I'd wager half the villagers fled south when the Lannisters came through." Sansa studied the town. "We do not linger," she said. "Send half the host under Herald to restore order, clear hazards, bury the dead, send any survivors to safety in Tully lands. The rest come with me to Winterfell." He nodded, dispatching riders to execute her orders. Sansa watched as clouds scudded overhead, then turned her horse's head northward. The stark beauty of the riverlands filled her chest with longing. Rolling plains, forests fringed by hedgerows, and in the distance, the dark towers of Riverrun, rising like a crown upon its island. She would not stop there. Her destination loomed beyond. Winterfell, the seat of her birth, where her brother Robb held court in defiance of the Southern Crown. At midday, on the third day, as the sun passed its zenith, they saw the towers of Winterfell crest the distant ridgeline. The lawn stretched wide before them, a carpet of green and gold dotted with banners. The direwolf of the north, the trout of Tully, and now the falcon and the wolf united. Sansa's chest tightened. Every memory of harsh winters and happier summers pressed in upon her. Runaway races in the Godswood, lessons with Maester Luwin by firelight, the scent of her mother's cooking drifting through the kitchens. Robb Stark stood atop the battlements, armored in gleaming steel, sword girded at his hip. Beside him rode his queen in winter, Catelyn Tully, her auburn hair bright against her blue gown. Both looked down as the Vale host entered the gates, and Sansa felt the wind catch her cloak, billowing it wide like wings. She reined in and rode forward alone, spurs clicking on stone. As was custom, she dismounted before the gates and approached on foot, head inclined. Lysa Arryn's envoy, 2 knights bearing the Vale's standard, followed her to stand guard. The gate opened with a groan, and Robb strode down to meet her, his gray eyes alight with surprise. "Sansa," he breathed, voice thick with emotion. "You ride with the mountain host at your back. You wear the helm of the Protector. You look every inch the leader I always knew you could be." She straightened, meeting his gaze. "Brother, I come with news and with vows. The Vale stands with us. Their lords have sworn to honor our alliance, and their host has marched to protect these lands." Robb's grin split his face, and he embraced her. "By the old gods and the new, you have done what I could not. You have tamed the falcon and bound it to the wolf." Catelyn emerged beside him, eyes glistening. "Sansa, you honor us all." She took Sansa's hands. "Welcome home." That night, in the great hall of Winterfell, lords and ladies of 2 realms gathered. The North's stalwart banners, Manderley, Mormont, Hornwood, alongside the Vale's falcons, Grafton's griffins, Waynwood's ivy, Royce's towers. The torches glowed like embers against the dark walls, and the long oak table groaned under platters of roasted boar, loaves of black bread, bowls of stewed turnips, and flagons of ale and spiced wine. Sansa sat between Robb and Catelyn at the high table, clad in a dress of northern wool embroidered with the falcon and wolf in silver threads. When the hall quieted, she rose. In her hand she held a letter sealed with the hand of the king in the south. Joffrey Baratheon's summons to bend the knee, delivered by a Lannister envoy who had been turned back at the Neck. She broke the seal and placed the parchment on the table. "Let the king in King's Landing know this," she declared, voice carrying to every ear, "that the North and the Vale stand together. We will not bow to tyranny. We will not serve a crown that murders its own people for gold." A roar rose from the hall. Robb pounded his fist on the table. "Hear, hear," he cried. "To the North and the Vale, may our enemies tremble." Catelyn rose, voice firm. "To Lady Sansa, protector of the Vale, whose wisdom and courage have bound our realms in common cause." Hornwood, Mormont, Waynwood, and every banner echoed their praises. Sansa felt warmth flood her cheeks. In that moment, she tasted victory. But she knew the war had just begun. In the days that followed, the combined forces of the North and Vale prepared for the march south. Sansa returned to the Eyrie to secure its borders, dispatching letters to Iron Islands and Reach alike, seeking support. She sent ravens to Dorne and the Stormlands, knowing that dragon's eggs and stag banners might tilt the war's balance. She negotiated with Ironborn captains for safe passage of supplies up the Trident and out through the Neck. Yet, even as alliances formed, darker specters stirred. In King's Landing, the Lannisters see that the defiance of two of the realm's greatest powers. Tyrion Lannister, Hand of the King, dispatched command after command. Dispatch riders to the Rock, letters to Bronn's former comrades, orders to send the Iron Fleet to blockade the northern sea lanes. Cersei, consumed by rage, begged for vengeance, her mind poisoned with visions of wolves flayed and falcons crushed. In the Vale, Sansa's Aunt Lysa suffered nights of fevered dreams, whispers of betrayal and cliffs opening to swallow her. Sansa soothed her, reading the old songs of the North by night, chanting the oaths whispered by the first men, assuring Lysa that truth was her shield. And then came the raven that bore the black seal of the Iron Throne. The Freys, purchased by the Lannisters, had slaughtered those who held the crossing at the Twins, seemingly cutting off the North's reinforcements. Lord Walder Frey's banners now flew over the Roserad, and his men patrolled the causeways, spying on every traveler. Robb Stark's face darkened when he read the news. "The Freys have turned their swords against their own vows," he said, voice low. "They will regret this betrayal." Sansa laid a hand on his arm. "We have contingency. The mountain clans will harry their flanks, and Sir Bronn awaits them in the forests. We will reopen the crossing at Raventry. More importantly, the Vale and North must move swiftly before the Lannisters can reinforce the Twins." And so one day, she devised the plan. A pincer movement with the northern host advancing down the western road toward the Twins, and the Vale Knights crossing the Mountains of the Moon by a secret path known only to clan guides. In the pre-dawn hours, they would strike the Freys before breakfast could stain their cups red. On the 5th day of the 7th moon, under a silver half-moon sky, the armies moved. In the darkness, Sansa rode with Sir Harold and Lady Waynwood's 300 knights, winding through a narrow mist-shrouded pass known as the Wolf's Hollow. The air was so cold it stung their lungs, and more than once they paused to push aside overhanging boughs thick with hoarfrost. At the pass's end, they emerged on a plateau overlooking the Roserad, where the Twins' towers glimmered like two sentinels against the night sky. Below, the Frey camp lay quiet. Fires dwindled to embers, sentries dozing by smoldering braziers. Sansa drew her cloak close and signaled the attack. Harold raised his sword, and the knights descended like wolves on a deer, charging into the camp with torches and cries. The Freys awoke to the clash of steel, half-armored men scrambling from blankets as lances shattered tents and torches flared. Sansa leapt from her mount, sword drawn. She cut down a Frey crossbowman who raised his weapon, swept past an officer shouting orders, and drove her blade into the enemy's thigh. He fell, and she stood over him, breath ragged. "Tell your lord that the Vale fears no oathbreaker," she whispered, ripping her blade free as flame and iron. All across the camp, the Freys were in disarray, their banners trodden, their watchmen lost in panic. The Vale Knights fought with feral precision, sterling steel flashing beneath the lantern's glow. Yet, as dawn crept over the horizon, a new horror emerged. The Lannister host, banners of gold and crimson, advancing along the Roserad, 2 days' march made swift by forced levies from the Westerlands. Their war engines wheeled forward, and the ground trembled with the thrum of their approach. Sansa rallied her knights around the plateau's edge. Below, Robb Stark's host thundered toward the castle gates of the Twins. Voices lifted in war cries. For a moment, the world held its breath. North and Vale united, facing the Frey's betrayal and the Lannister host in a deadly trap. Sansa raised her sword, voice carrying like thunder across the plateau. For the Vale, for Winterfell, to me, and to victory. Her knights answered with a roar that shook the very stones. Then they charged down the slopes, into the waiting Lannister lines, and a new battle began. One that would decide the fate of kingdoms. The clash of steel, the thunder of hooves, the agonized cries of men and horses, all became one great tumult beneath the sunrise. Sansa fought at the forefront, her sword flashing as she parried a Lannister knight's thrust, then drove him back into a tangle of cavalry. At her side, Sir Harold cut down foes with brutal efficiency, while Lady Waynwood's knights wheeled in on the enemy's flanks. Above the din, she caught sight of Robb, his great sword swinging in a wide arc that cut through Freys and Lannisters alike. Catelyn, astride her destrier, tended to the wounded and rallied the men with cries of "Stark! Vale, strike now!" But the Lannisters pressed hard, their heavy infantry forming shield walls and their crossbowmen loosing volleys that splintered shields. The Vale knights faltered, and Sansa saw a surge of red and gold banners bearing down on her flank. She spurred her mount into their ranks, hacking at the nearest soldiers until she burst through to a sheltered hollow where a fallen boulder provided scant cover. Gasping for breath, she scanned the field. To her right, Robb's banners still flew, though his men were outnumbered. Behind her, the Vale knights regrouped, but they were pinned between two pressing lines. A hand seized her arm. It was Sir Bronn. He nodded toward a narrow defile where a handful of mountain clansmen lay in ambush. "Your plan, Lady Sansa," he panted. "Now, or we're crushed." Sansa risked a glance at the tumultuous battle, then nodded. "Lead me." They dashed through the sheltered path, sidestepping cannon fire and arrow shafts that hissed overhead. Exiting the defile, they emerged behind the Lannister lines, where supply wagons stood unguarded. Sailors from Gulltown, pressed into service as drovers, fought with pitchforks and pitch torches, their eyes alight with desperation. Sansa raised her voice, rallying her companions. "To the wagons! Light them! Deny them their supplies! And now!" Flames leapt as torches set alight the grain and oil stores. The wagons burned with an orange roar that turned the gray dawn sky to copper. Lannister soldiers, drawn to the blaze, deserted the front to fight the fire. In that moment, Robb's host burst through the main gate of the Twins, shield wall meeting shield wall, in a crescendo of clashing steel. Sansa plunged into the chaos, driving her sword through the driver of a supply wagon, then spinning to face a Lannister guard captain. Their blades rang as she parried blow after blow, each strike echoing like a drumbeat in her skull. He snarled and lunged, but she sidestepped, bringing her pommel to his jaw. He staggered, and she finished him with a swift cut across the throat. Behind her, the fire spread to the stables, where captured warhorses reared in terror. Sansa's lungs burned from smoke and exertion, but she pressed on, rounding a supply cart, to find Sir Harold pinned beneath a fallen wagon wheel. She dropped to her knees, biting off 2 enemy spearmen with her gauntlet, then freed Harold with a heave. He rose, sword in hand, and together they broke through the line, riding back toward the open field where their numbers, Vale and North, Zell held ground. Around them, Lannister colors wavered, and the Freys, their plans in ruins, fell into disordered retreat toward the twin towers they called home. By midday, the Lannister host began a disciplined withdrawal, their banners lowered, columns breaking into turns down the Roserad. Sansa, astride her mount at the field center, raised her sword high. Robb met her there, his helm dented, but his smile triumphant. "You have done it, sister," he said, voice rough. "The Vale and the North have broken the Lannister spear." She returned his smile, exhaustion and elation mingling in her chest. "This is but the first blow," she answered. "The war is far from over, but we have won a victory that will echo through the Seven Kingdoms." Catelyn rode up beside them, fatigue and pride shining in her eyes. "Tonight, we feast at the Twins. 500 captives and a captured Lannister cartel. Enough to stock every holdfast in the Vale and the North through the next winter." "Memsau." Sansa let her gaze drift to the smoking wagons and the shattered banners. Around them, the survivors of the battle gathered the wounded, tended to the dying, and bound their fallen kin in blankets of wool and furs. In that moment, the reality of war closed around her, its cost measured in blood and ash. Yet she felt no regret, only resolve. For every life lost, she vowed to bring a dozen more to safety. For every banner torn, she pledged to weave a stronger alliance. This was the price of freedom, and she would pay it willingly, so that the Vale might stand as the bulwark of liberty, and the North might grow mighty once more. As the sun dipped beyond the western ridge, painting the sky in blood red and gold, Sansa Stark, maiden, protector, and warrior, rode among her people, her banner fluttering above. The coming nights would be filled with celebration and commemoration, but in her heart, she already planned the next move. The march to King's Landing, the siege of the Red Keep, and the final reckoning with those who would see her realm kneel. And when that day came, she would stand before the Iron Throne herself, no longer a pawn of fate, but queen in all but name, her sword and her will the true instruments of power. For she had learned that survival demanded more than steel. It demanded courage, unity, and the unbreakable bonds of kin and oath. The wind sighed through the shattered field, carrying the echoes of triumph and warning alike. Sansa lifted her chin and spurred her horse forward, eyes set on the distant horizon. Behind her, the fires burned bright, and the banners of wolf and falcon mingled among the smoke, proclaiming to all who would see, here rode the Lion Slayers, the Oathkeepers, and the heralds of a new age in Westeros. And they would not be denied. Okay. Onja. The Valesmen and Northmen encamped on the rolling fields before the Twins as dusk settled into a bruised purple sky. Tents flickered with lamplight. The air smelled of roasting meat, fresh hay picked from northern barns, and the acrid tang of war smoke lingering on the wind. Sansa Stark rode among the lines, cloaked now in her travel cloak rather than armor, passing from company to company. She greeted the Vale infantryists, who still winced at the memory of the Lannister spearmen's thrusts. She clasped the hand of a veteran from House Mormont, whose eyebrow had been nicked. She comforted a Vale recruit, who had lost his brother in the charge through Wolf's Hollow, promising him land from one of the defeated Frey manors once the realm was at peace. By firelight, she watched her northern brother Robb Stark preside over the long table of the temporary war hall, an old, boarded-over barn near the eastern bank of the Green Fork. He wore no crown, only a simple black cloak lined with white fur, the direwolf sigil pinned at his breast. Around him sat Lord Tully, toothless but shrewd, Lord Royce, impassive as ever, Lady Anya Waynwood, keen-eyed and unsmiling, and Sir Bronn, who leaned forward, elbows on the table, ready to speak at any moment. Sansa slipped into a rough wooden chair beside Catelyn, whose tired gaze lit briefly at her arrival. "The fields smell of spring," Sansa observed softly. "Yes, if winter never came." Catelyn smiled wanly. "A blessing, if true. But war has its seasons of blood. We must not be lulled by pleasant air." Robb cleared his throat, drawing the chamber to order. "My sister," he said, turning to Sansa, "has arranged for the clans of the Vale to hold the eastern flank. Their mountain bowmen ride with the squires of the Vale, and their scouts will watch against any further treachery from Freys or Lannisters. At dawn, we march south. Our banners will converge on Harrenhal, then strike west into the Westerlands." He paused, blades of torchlight dancing across his face. "Any objections?" Lord Tully shook his head. "Only that we lack heavy siege engines." Harrenhal's walls are thick as the Red Mountains. We must find a way to breach them, or starve them out. Benti. Sansa leaned forward. I have considered that. The Vale has a contingent of engineers from Gulltown who can build trebuchets. We need high ground to position them, perhaps the ridge north of the Roserad, just beyond the Lofston farms. Robb nodded. Make it so. Sir Bronn, you will oversee the construction. I trust your wits more than most. Bronn grinned. With pleasure, my lord. And I'll rig them to hurl anything. Stones, fire pots, even sharpened beams. Lady Waynwood tipped her chin. You speak of slaughter, but what of the innocents within? Harrenhal is cursed, but it houses small folk who know no banners. Sansa answered, They will be given quarter to flee before the siege. I will send riders to the surrounding villages to escort non-combatants to the north. No walls will fall until the people have safe passage. A hush fell. Even Catelyn raised her brows. Mercy, she said softly. The Stark way. Robb offered a curt nod. Then let it be written. At first light, we march. May the old gods guide us. He pounded the table once. Horns outside answered, echoing down the river valley. Night passed in restless anticipation. Sansa found sleep elusive. Her mind alive with maps and timetables, and the weight of every life in her army. Short of her pavilion, the sky rumbled with distant thunder. A spring storm, promising rain. By midnight she rose, donned her cloak, and slipped from the flapped tent to walk among the sentries. Below the starlight, she spotted Sir Harold Inkpen conferring with a group of Mountain Clan scouts, their braided beards hung with bone talismans. She approached quietly. Sir Harold, she said. He looked up. Milady, they've reported a Frey supply train moving across the plain at dawn. She told him. 300 wagons, lightly guarded. It would cripple them to lose it. His eyes gleamed. We can ambush it near the Willow Ford, before it reaches the causeway. Coordinate it with the clans. Sansa instructed. But delay until after we turn out at dawn. We need to keep our main army's advance secret until we strike the walls. Then shall. He bowed. As you command. Satisfied, she pressed on into the camp shadows. Ahead, fires still smoldered, horses hobbled. She wondered at the men's dreams. If they dreamed of home, of revenge, of nothingness after too much violence. She carried memories of her own nightmares from King's Landing, of flames and mocking faces. But in those nightmares she found a mask of steel that she now wore in the waking world. Gray light filtered the horizon as the knights assembled. At the head of the column, Sansa rode with Robb and Catelyn, their banners catching the rain-slick air. The Vale cavalry trotted beside the Stark knights, bridged by a contingent of mountain bowmen whose silent pull of bowstrings conveyed their readiness. Sansa felt the rhythm of the march in her bones, a war march unlike any courtly parade. She heard the footfalls of thousands of soldiers on dewy grass, the creak of leather harnesses, the distant clang of hammers against the stones of newly built siege engines. They halted at the ridge north of the Lofston fields. From this vantage, they could see Harrenhal rising like a dead god, its black towers ringed with ravens, its walls scarred by time. Between them lay flat ground pockmarked by winter's floods. On its far edge, a single guard tower marked the entrance to a causeway that led directly to the castle's outer bailey. Robb dismounted and joined Sansa, pointing toward the plain. Our main army will wheel around the fields to the south, cut the causeway behind those fields, and trap the garrison. Meanwhile, Sir Bronn's engineers will begin firing on the northern walls until the Freys surrender, or until the walls break. Dainai, Sansa nodded. And Harold's force will intercept that wagon train at the ford. Without supplies, the garrison will starve quickly. She turned to Catelyn. We prepare the townsfolk to cross the bridge under guard. I will ride with them to safety. Catelyn's face tightened. We may need you here on the ridge, but your plan is sound. She offered her arm. Sansa took it. Then they shall have mercy, even as we strike the Freys mercilessly. Sansa led a company of 500 archers, spearmen, and guards down the slope to the Lothston hamlet. Rain began to fall in earnest, turning the paths to mire. She found the townsfolk huddled in hovels, women clutching infants, elderly men with rheumy eyes, children with faces streaked by soot and tears. Her heart tightened as she spoke kind words and ordered them to line up in columns, to carry bread and blankets provided by the Vale stores. A hushed hush settled as she knelt before the oldest woman, whose sunken face had the map of too many winters. "Gran, no one here will be harmed if you follow me. The armies march below us. You are safe with the Vale and the North." The woman's eyes shone. "Lady Stark, may the gods watch over you for this kindness." She took Sansa's hand, crooking in age, and pressed it to her chest. Sansa pressed back, her throat tight. A horn sounded from the ridge. Sansa looked up. A single blast, the signal. She rose. "Move quickly, all of you. I will lead you under the escort of knight and bowman." "Benawand." They filed behind her, Sansa placing herself at the head of the line. As they passed the foot of the ridge, rain-pelting faces, she saw beyond them the causeway guard. 200 Frey crossbowmen, pitted against the skeleton of Harold's force, drawn up at the willow ford. From the heights above, a second horn sounded, a low rumble of steel. And then, from the misty plain, came the thunder of hooves. 300 Vale cavalry, led by Vale captains and mountain lords, sweeping across the sodden field in a glittering wedge of steel and blue. Harold's ambush sprung as the Freys rode past the ford. Trained archers loosed shafts into their flanks. Clansmen hurled hatchets and rocks from the riverbank. Then the cavalry crashed into the rear of the guard, sending crossbowmen sprawling. The battle was brief and brutal. Within 15 minutes the Freys lay broken, their wagons aflame, their banners torn. Sansa rode past the carnage, cloak soaked, face set in grim resolve. At the ford's edge, she found Sir Harold, leading a captive Frey knight to his knees. The captive looked up, eyes wide. "You have no right here, girl," he spat. "The king's peace demands it. You have none to give." Sansa interrupted coldly. "The Freys broke their vows. Their kin bleed in the twins even now. Your lord betrays every oath he swore. Now you will beg mercy from those you betrayed." She drew her sword and pointed its tip at his chest. "Speak your lord's name, and swear that the Freys will never raise arms against the Vale or the North again." He swallowed, panic flickering. Walder Frey. "I swear, on my father's head, that House Frey yields to this host and renounces its oaths to the crown." Sansa nodded. "Then begone. Ride to the twins and tell your lord that if he does not surrender within the hour, we will march through his gates and burn the castle until no stone stands." The knight shivered, then scrambled to his feet and spurred his horse toward the causeway, leaving his fallen comrades amid the mud. Sansa sheathed her sword, then turned back to the exodus of villagers. She caught Catelyn's eye among the archers, and they exchanged a brief nod. Mercy had been done. By midday the civilians were safe behind the ridge. Tully's ravens squawked overhead, winging south and west with messages of deliverance. Sansa returned to the camp's high ground, where Robb's host now gathered at the causeway's end, heavy cavalry and infantry forming ranks. The Freys at the twins had not yet responded. Their gates remained shut, towers void of banners. Sansa found Robb standing atop the shattered remains of an old milestone. "They will yield," he said. "They know they cannot hold both sides of the causeway." She clasped his arm. "Then let us show them justice tempered with mercy. Offer them terms, surrender the castle, hand over the Frey captains, and swear fealty to the North and Vale, or face the full might of our siege." He grinned. "Your word, sister. Deliver them." She mounted her horse and rode to the causeway, flanked by Vale knights. At its midpoint, she made ready the war horn, a long bronze instrument carved with direwolf and falcon motifs. She lifted it to her lips and sounded a clear blast that cut through the storm's drizzle. Far in the distance, the towers of the twins stirred. A banner flapped uncertainly from one rooftop. Sansa dismounted and strode along the causeway toward the closed gates. From behind the portcullis came the echo of boots upon stone. The gates creaked open, revealing the gaunt-faced Lord Walder Frey himself, seated on a dais of rough-hewn chairs, his great halls eerily empty like a mausoleum. His sons and grandsons clustered behind, hands resting on corrupted hilts, eyes downcast. "Lord Frey," Sansa called, voice firm across the gap. "Die you. You have been offered mercy. Surrender the castle, deliver your officers, and pledge House Frey to our alliance, and your people will live. Refuse, and we will bring down these walls with trebuchets and flame, and none within will be spared." Walder's lips twisted into a sardonic smile. "A pretty speech," he sneered. "But I have walls. You have no cannon yet. Let your armies come, and I will show you why Frey steel is feared." Then, behind Sansa, Robb rode up, clad now in full battle armor. He waved a hand toward the valley. 5,000 men, Lord Frey, and the Vale host at my back. We will have engines by night's fall. Choose now. The old man's eyes flickered as he took Robb's measure. He looked to Sansa. "And who are you to lecture me?" he ground. "A girl in braid? You have the wolf, yes. But the Vale Falcon cannot fly from these heights." Sansa squared her shoulders. "I am protector of the Vale, and a Stark born of Winterfell. We have broken Lannister spears, chased Frey blood from the ford, and stand ready to burn these towers unless you yield. Think well of your people before you order them to slaughter." Then a silence fell. Then Walder's sons murmured, shifting uneasily. At last, the old lord rose, his joints creaking like timber in a storm. He raised trembling hands. "Very well. I yield." He spat on the gate's threshold. "But know this, girl. Freys do not forgive. Freys do not forget." Sansa inclined her head. "We do not demand forgiveness. We demand peace." She turned and signaled the blowing horn again. 2 blasts this time. At the ridge, the heavy cavalry withdrew from siege positions. The garrison soldiers marched out in single file, laying down arms that clattered on stone. Behind her, Robb dismounted and crossed onto the causeway. He clasped the Lord's hand, and then drew him aside. Sansa watched as her brother's face darkened in council. When they returned, the Frey captains were escorted to the north face of the camp, bound and guarded for the great council to come. That evening, the campfires burned bright across the willow fields as the banners of wolf and falcon flew side by side. The rain had ceased. Stars glimmered like hoarded gold above. Sansa sat beside Robb at a smaller table beneath a canvas awning, a simple meal of cold stew and fresh bread before them. Steam rose in the chill air. "You did well today," Robb said, passing her a cup of wine. "The banners will sing of Sansa Stark's cunning long after kings and castles lie in ruin." She smiled ruefully. "I only followed the map you gave me. Stone Ridge for the trebuchets, the Ford's Marsh for the ambush. But the Frey Lord's stubbornness nearly cost us the civilians. Mercy is more delicate than cruelty." He sipped his wine. "It is the mark of true leadership. Cersei will never show it. Neither will Tywin. We will be remembered by how we treat the weak." She raised her cup. "To mercy, then. And to victory. May they come together." He clinked cups. "To mercy and victory." They drank. Around them, the war camp settled into uneasy peace. Ahead lay Harrenhal's walls, the Lannister host still massing beyond the hills, and the long road south toward King's Landing. But for the first time, Sansa felt the shape of victory in her hands. She had tamed the Vale, united with the North, broken the Freys, and repelled the Lannister spear. Now the realm's fate rested on the next move, on whether the alliances forged in fire could hold against the storms to come. As she rose to walk the length of the causeway and inspect the vaulting trebuchets being positioned at dusk, she felt the chill of the night air mingle with the heat of triumph. The long war had only just begun, yet in that moment, Sansa Stark, the banished bird who had become the Falcon's master, knew that her name would be written in the histories of Westeros, not as a pawn, but as its protector. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, she prepared her mind and her armies for the march that would shake the Seven Kingdoms to their foundations. The dawn fog clung to the battered trebuchets like ghosts of old wars as Sansa Stark rode forward to inspect the siege engines arrayed along the ridge. Below her, the broad sweep of the Rosawad carved a slashed gap through the fields. Beyond that, the yawning walls of Harrenhal rose, blackened, pockmarked, and ominous. The air smelled of damp earth and boiling oil. Hammer blows rang from the engineers' platform where Dornish exiles and Grafton craftsmen strained to ready the great machines. Sir Bronn stood beside her, his leather jerkin flecked with rain and sweat. "Ready when you are, my lady," he called over the din, voice hoarse but triumphant. "Fling a stone and scare them into surrender, or at least crack a wall." Sansa touched the pommel of her sword and drew a deep breath. "Let them see that mercy is theirs to accept now, before the stones fly." She nodded to a herald in white and blue, who raised his trumpet to his lips. A clear blast echoed down the valley, a single note, like a heartbeat in the hollow dawn. Far below, within Harrenhal's courtyard, the battered flag of House Lannister snapped in the wind. A lone rider emerged from the sally port, a pale knight in smudged plate, and galloped across the open ground toward the ridge. As he drew near, the knight reined in, dismounted, and knelt in the mud before Sansa, head bowed. "My lady protector," he said, voice quavering. "I am Sir Mikhael of the Gold Road, captain of this garrison. I come to parley." Sansa inclined her head. "Speak, Sir Mikhael, before the first stone falls." He lifted his battered helm from his chest. "My lord commands me to ask for terms. He will surrender the castle on the morrow, if you spare the lives of all within, and grant safe passage to any who wish to go free." "Menentender." Sansa's eyes narrowed. She turned to Sir Bronn and Sir Harold. "My lords, this garrison holds 70 spearmen, 30 knights, and 500 conscripts. We could level the walls by midday tomorrow. Do you favor their terms?" Harold spat on the ground. "Let them go, my lady. We have little taste for more blood." Bronn flexed his gauntlet, but nodded. "Better to save our engines and our men for King's Landing." Sansa turned back to Sir Mikhael, face composed. "We accept your lord's surrender, under these conditions. All arms laid down at sunrise. Any choosing to depart may do so on horseback under our guard. The rest will be bound and escorted to the Vale for judgment. But know this, if any re-raise arms or attempt to ambush, we will return with harsher mercy." "We will return with harsher mercy." Sir Mikhael bowed so deeply that his helm kissed the mud. "I swear, on my knighthood, that the garrison will lay down its arms and obey." Sansa inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Then go. Tell your men well." The knight scrambled to his feet and vanished into the drizzle, galloping toward the gates. Behind her, Sansa felt the tension lift like a storm cloud breaking. Rain pattered on her cloak, stinging her cheeks, but she welcomed it. Cleansing, renewing. She turned to the great walls before her, the shattered stones of Harrenhal that had seen centuries of bloodshed. "Tomorrow," she breathed. "At dawn we take the castle." That evening, as the host made camp on the road below the walls, Sansa convened with Robb and Catelyn in a tent pinned with banners of wolf and falcon. A rough table bore a map of the Riverlands, dotted with markers in charcoal and white chalk. "The garrison will lay down their arms, but we cannot leave Harrenhal intact," Robb said, tracing a finger along the map toward King's Road. "It's too symbolic. A seat of tragedy for the Starks and a fortress for our enemies. We must dismantle its defenses before we march south." Catelyn frowned. "We lack the manpower for a full demolition. We could use sappers to collapse weak towers, but the core walls will stand." Sansa spoke quietly, eyes on the map. "Then we remove its value. Burn the tapestries, ruin the great hall, destroy the chains that keep its gates. Strip it of supplies, scatter its stones. Let Harrenhal stand as a ruin under our banner. A warning to any who would defy the North and the Vale." "A warning to any who would defy the North and the Vale." Robb nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. You would make it a monument, neither garrison nor home, but a testament to what happens to traitors. Exactly, Sansa said. Then the road south lies clear, and no one will covet that dark pile again. Catelyn placed her hand on Sansa's shoulder. You judge wisely, child. Harrenhal will burn in memory, not in flame. At first light, the gates of Harrenhal creaked open. A column of battered soldiers filed out. Knights whose lances were chipped, spearmen whose helms were dented, conscripts whose eyes were hollow with hunger. Sansa, atop her gray mare, watched as they laid their swords at her feet. She gave the word, and her knights disarmed them, kneeling to collect the blades. Beyond the gate, bronze men moved like shadows through the deserted corridors, tearing down tapestries of crimson and gold, smashing stained glass windows, dragging benches from the sept into the courtyard to burn in pyres of rotting wood. Sir Harold's detachment led the sappers to the eastern towers, collapsing ramparts until the stones fell in clouds of dust like ghosts returning to the earth. Sansa stood at the head of the great hall, its vaulted timbers charred and bare. She watched the flames flicker, reflected in broken shields and fragments of shattered girders. As smoke curled toward the sky, she spoke to the gathered captains of her host. Let Harrenhal stand as a ruin under our watch, she said. A monument to broken oaths and a testament to the power of unity. From here to King's Landing, let no lord forget what it costs to betray the stark oath. Her voice carried through the vast emptiness. A hush fell, broken only by the crackling of flames. Then a cheer rose, low at first, then swelling, until the echoes of their voices shook the battlements above them. For 2 days the host rested at Harrenhal's outer fields, healing the wounded and rallying the troops. Valleymen and Northmen shared loaves of warm bread baked in field ovens, swapping tales of home and hardship. The mountain clansmen fished the Green Fork for trout and shared their dried venison in exchange for ale. Sansa rode among them, listening, learning their stories, weaving their loyalty into her growing tapestry of allegiance. On the third dawn they broke camp. Ahead lay the broad reach of the Riverlands, where the Freys had once betrayed them, and beyond that, the gates of King's Landing. At sunrise, Sansa stood on a low hill overlooking the splayed host, bannered regiments sharpening weapons, engineers loading the last of the trebuchets, scouts vanishing into morning mist. Robb joined her, shoulder to shoulder. This is war's true face, he said softly. No feast, no pride. Only the marching of steel. She breathed in the chill air, watching larks wheel above the encampment. It is necessary. The Vale and the North stand together now. Behind us, a ruin that speaks of broken promise. Ahead, a capital that must remember mercy, if mercy is to be offered. Robb clasped her arm. Then let us march. For mercy and for victory. They turned to the host, and at Sansa's signal, the great war horn sounded. Trumpets deep as thunder, horns shrill as falcon cries. The banners snapped, the ground trembled, and the combined armies of North and Vale began their march southward. A wave of wolves and falcons riding toward the fiery heart of the realm. Beneath the gray sky, the war that would reshape Westeros was underway. And at its spearhead rode Sansa Stark, no longer a frightened girl, but a leader whose steel and mercy had bound mountains and snow in common cause. As the banners wheeled down the Roserat, she closed her eyes, whispering the old words of the North. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. And survive they would, together, until the Iron Throne lay empty, and the Seven Kingdoms knew the price of defiance and the power of unity. And all. The march south pressed on, the combined host of Vale and North winding through fields scorched by spring's first storms. The northern riders wore fur-lined cloaks stained with mud and rain, while the Vale Knights' cloaks flapped pale against slate skies. Behind them followed the siege engines, their great frames shrouded in tarps, drawn by oxen and protected by squads of archers. By the 5th day, they had crossed the Red Fork and turned east toward the narrow chalk causeway that led to King's Landing. There, the city's spires rose like black spears against the horizon. The Red Keep perched atop Aegon's Hill. Along the banks of the Blackwater Rush, small fishing villages had fled or been abandoned. Only the bodies of horse and ox, left to rot, testified to the crown's preparations. Sansa rode alongside Robb as they reached the high ground overlooking the river. Below, the shoreline bulged with war galleys and merchant ships pressed into military service. The Iron Fleet's twisted black hulls lay anchored near the shore. Tully's river patrol had not yet reached the bay, and Lannister ships maintained a blockade. Across the water, King's Landing's lower walls gleamed red in the sun, as though bathing in the blood of the realm. Robb's hand went to the hilt of his sword. "They've turned the river into a moat," he said grimly. "Our ships cannot slip past without a fight." Sansa studied the lines. "Then we draw their eye elsewhere." She pointed southward, to the narrow sliver of road that hugged the bay's shoreline. "Let the main army march down the Roserad and feint toward the city's gates. Meanwhile, I will ride with a detachment around the Wolf's Tail and strike at the harbor. With trebuchets from the ridge, we can send rocks crashing into those ships and clear a passage for our own vessels." Robb considered. "A bold gambit. If the harbor falls, the city's supplies dwindle, and the sea becomes ours. But you'll need men of arms skilled in gunnery and a path through those cliffs." Sansa's lips curved. "Then I'll call upon the mountain clans once more. Their ladders and ropes will carry my men up the jagged slopes." Then, under cover of morning mist, Sansa assembled a force of 300 heavy infantry, 50 of the Vale engineers, and 200 Dornish sappers, who had learned the art of siege under Bronn's tutelage. Guided by the mountain clansmen, they slipped off the Roserad and turned east, threading along the base of the cliffs that curved like a wolf's tail around Blackwater Bay. They moved through hidden coves and brackish marsh, until at last they reached a narrow beach littered with driftwood and eel traps. There, beneath a ridge crowned with boulders and gorse, the trebuchets waited. 2 engines already sighted and ready, their frames bound in iron and oak. To one side, Dornish sappers hacked trenches into the clay, creating platforms for firing lines. Above them, the cliff face soared. Sansa descended on foot, water lapping her boots, and watched her engineers load the first stone. 70 pounds, one measured. He thrust a spear of pitch into the mortar, lighting it. For Blackwater Row. At Sansa's signal, they heaved. The arm swung upward, and the stone soared in a graceful arc, tracing a high curve before crashing against the prow of the nearest Lannister galley. The wood splintered. The sailors cried in panic as water surged into the breach. The second trebuchet cut loose. Its shot struck the mainmast of a larger vessel, bringing sails, rigging, and crow's nest crashing into the river. A cheer rose from the hidden platform. Sansa's lungs burned with exhilaration as she raised her gauntleted fist. "Fire again!" she cried. For 2 hours they battered the anchored fleet. Fires broke out along the docks, rigging snapped like lifelines in a drowning man's grasp. Fleeing sailors leapt into the water. From the walls of King's Landing, the defenders turned their archers upon the position, shafts hissing through the wet air. Dornish shields splintered, Dornish flesh reddened, but the engines thundered on. At last, the fleet lay broken. 2 galleys sunk, 3 more disabled, and a dozen longships adrift. Sails torn. The oil stores on the docks ignited, and smoke curled skyward in thick columns. Sansa signaled retreat. The men withdrew, pausing only to block the approach with felled trees and sharpened stakes. Behind them, the mountain clansmen slid cables down the cliff. Ropes and ladders rattled as the infantry ascended to safety. When they rejoined the main host on the Roserad, Sansa found Robb awaiting her, concern etched on his face. "You've done it," he said, arms wide. "The harbor's burning. Their river patrol is scattered." He exhaled, relief warring with awe. "The sea is ours." Sansa nodded, chest heaving. "And at nightfall, our own vessels sail in." By sundown, Tully's river galleys had crept past the broken blockade under cover of darkness, their lanterns dimmed, oars muffled. Twice they grounded on sandbars, and twice Sansa's scouts freed them. Alongside them, merchant ships, press-ganged into service, followed the flotilla, laden with supplies and siege ladders. Vale knights, soaked to the skin, clambered aboard, their banners snapping as they heaved heavy rope ladders over the sides. That night, as the army encamped beneath the city walls, Sansa stood on deck of the lead galley, robes damp, hair windblown. Before her, the lower city slumbered against the tide. From the walls, torches flickered like watchful eyes. A dozen harbormasters' towers and warehouses dotted the shore, each a bulwark of poison, salt, and grain. The lifeblood of the siege. Robb stood beside her, the moonlight pale on his face. "Tomorrow we cross the Blackwater and strike at the city gates," he said. "The Red Keep must fall, or the war drags on." Sansa's gaze swept across the quay. "We'll need troops to hold the walls once we're in. I suggest we send the Vale heavy cavalry northward through the city streets. Fast riders who know the Vale alleys, to seize the Dragon Pit and raise our banners. The Northmen can storm the gates to the Red Keep." He frowned. "Dragon Pit? That ancient ruin is a maze. Many could be lost." She pressed his hand. "Then I will lead the cavalry myself." A silence fell, and he met her eyes. "Are you certain?" he whispered. She drew a steadying breath. "I must. To be seen atop Aegon's Hill, under the Falcon and Wolf, will shatter their will. Men are one." Robb covered her hand with his. "Then we ride together." At dawn's gray light, the first barges hit the crescent shore at Stony Septot. Vale knights charged ashore beneath arrows and pikes. Dornish engineers followed, hacking stakes into the beach to form a makeshift palisade. Across the river, drums beat. A massive flame cannon mounted on the city walls bloomed, belching molten bronze. Missiles that splashed among the galleys, shredding oars and searing flesh. Flames licked the decks of two longships, and sailors leapt, screams echoing off stone. Sansa, astride her black destrier, signaled the cavalry. They spurred into the surf, steel flashing as they bore down the embankment. Robb's banners, affixed to the galley's stern, billowed like storm clouds. When their hooves struck solid ground, the defenders recoiled. "Strike for the Dragon Pit," Sansa roared. Bronze knights veered right, slicing through pikes to seize the narrow alley that led to the old Valyrian amphitheater. Behind them, the sound of the main assault horn thundered as Northmen surged toward the city gates. Sansa's heart pounded. The city's defenders regrouped, its elite gold cloaks wheeling into formation. Crossbow bolts whined, pike shafts jabbed. But the cavalry, shod with northern steel, disciplined by Sansa's iron will, broke the line. Horsemen vaulted the low walls of the alley, sabers slicing, and spilled into the courtyard of the Dragon Pit, its broken columns towering like severed wings. On the broken dais at its center, Sansa reined in. She drew her sword and raised it, the wolf and falcon etched on its pommel catching the sunlight. "Raise our banner," she cried. Her knights unfurled the wolf on white and falcon on blue. A cheer burst from within the amphitheater. Below the ruined arches, the banners snapped in the wind, a sign of dominion that no walls could deny. Across the city, the Northmen battered the gates. At the Lion's Gate, Robb himself led the charge atop his mount, routing defenders and forcing the portcullis back with iron rams. The crowd roared as gates clanged open, and the Vale cavalry poured through the streets toward the Red Keep. By midday, the host had surged into King's Landing's lower wards. Fires dotted the rooftops, and smoke choked the narrow streets. Sansa rode at the vanguard beside Robb, her mail stained with soot and water. At her side galloped Bronn and Harold. Behind them, gleaming Vale knights bore down on the city's heart. Ahead lay the Throne's Gate, beyond which rose the terraces of the Red Keep and the Iron Throne itself. A slender river ran beneath its walls, another moat to cross, another challenge to surmount. Yet everywhere they looked, the city was breaking. Gold cloaks surrendering, citizens weeping, the Lannister banners torn down and thrown into gutters. At the gate, a lone gold cloak captain held a trembling hand against his brow. "Stand down," he called. "The Queen Regent demands terms." Sansa raised her sword. "She will have none," she declared. "You have betrayed the realm. Yield now, and your heads may yet remain on your shoulders." He hesitated. then dropped his weapon. Behind him, the gate opened. Sansa spurred her horse forward. Robb followed. They crossed the river on hastily built wooden bridges, the splintered towers of the Red Keep looming above. On the great steps, Cersei stood flanked by her knights, pale, defiant, yet cornered. Her lips twisted into a glare, her gown streaked with dust and blood. She lifted her chin. "So," she said quietly, "the wolf and the falcon have come at last." Sansa dismounted, holding her sword point downward. "You have bled this city dry. You have murdered innocents. Your tyranny ends today." Cersei's eyes flashed. "And you will sit upon that throne in my place?" Sansa gestured upward to the Iron Throne's dais. "I will sit to guide the realm back to peace. Mercy for those who repent. Justice for those who refuse." A hush fell over the broken city. Cersei's breath caught. Her hand twitched toward dagger at her waist, but guilt and exhaustion held her back. "And what of me?" she whispered. Sansa's voice was firm but not unkind. "You will answer for your crimes before the new Great Council. Until then, you remain under guard." Cersei lowered her head. The guard stepped forward and took her wrist in iron gauntlets. As they led her away, the cheers of the host echoed through the courtyards, rising to the battlements of the Red Keep. Sansa turned to Robb, who stood beside the Iron Throne. He offered his hand. She took it and climbed the steps. On the black blades she knelt once, then rose to her full height. The realm awaited her words. She drew a breath that trembled with hope and duty, and then spoke. "Let the reign of fear end. Let the laws we forge be tempered by mercy and bound by honor. Let all who call Westeros home know that unity has been won by sacrifice and shall be kept by justice. This is the promise of the North and the Vale." And the host below roared its approval. From the shattered windows of the city, survivors wept and prayed. Across the bay, Tully's ships sounded their horns in salute. And so, upon the Iron Throne, where dragons once ruled, the Wolf Maiden rose to guide the Seven Kingdoms into a new age. Iha. Oh. Dawn found King's Landing hushed beneath a brittle sky. Pigeons flitted among the ruined battlements of the Red Keep. The tide lapped softly against the shattered docks below. Sansa Stark stood upon the Iron Throne's cold expanse, the black steel biting at her thighs through silk. In the courtyard beyond, the army of the North and the Vale, stalwart veterans who had marched for months, gathered under their banners, awaiting her word. The air still carried smoke from the burning galleys, and the faint clang of hammers as Vale engineers began repairing the breach in the harbor wall. She drew a slow breath, recalling the road that had brought her here. The creaking skiff on the Blackwater Rush, the daunting heights of the Eyrie, the clash at the Bloody Gate, the ruin of Harrenhal, the thunder of trebuchets against Blackwater Bay. Each victory had tempered her. No longer the frightened girl who trembled beneath Cersei's scorn, but a leader who had tamed mountain clans, bound the North and Vale in purpose, and undone a crown with more guile than blood. Now, as protector of the Vale and warden of the North, she would be regent of the Seven Kingdoms, at least until a new great council could be convened. Behind her, the great hall's vaulted ceilings dwarfed the assembly. On the dais, Catelyn Tully stood with Robb Stark, his cloak still stained with soot, while Lysa Arryn sat pale but determined. To Sansa's left, Sir Harold Inkpen knelt before a chest of scrolls. Treaties, oaths, pardons written in careful quill. To her right, Sir Bronn of the Blackwater cleaned his sword, as if even here he expected the next fight. The air brimmed with anticipation. "My lords and ladies," Sansa began, voice ringing through the hall. She felt the weight of countless eyes. Northern keen, Vale wary, Southern sympathizers in hiding. Yet she stood unshaken. "Today we close a chapter of blood and betrayal, peopled by oathbreakers and tyrants. We have delivered justice to the Freys, mercy to the garrison of Harrenhal, and unmasked the Lannisters before the realm. Yet our tasks are not done." She paused, letting the hush deepen. Below, a single gold cloak shifted his weight, uncertain whether to cheer or flee. The Iron Throne is melted steel upon stone. But its power lies not in its blades but in the law it represents. I will govern not by fear of my blade but by the honor of my word. I call this assembly of Northern and Vale lords, of Tully and Waynwood, of Manderley and Mormont, and even of those ravens returned from the south, Tyrell, Martell, Hightower, to seek counsel in drafting a new charter. A murmur ran through the hall. Lords shifted, foreheads creased in thought. Sansa raised a hand. First, we will address the food stores. The siege has emptied grain stores in King's Landing and beyond. I decree that the corn from the Reach, paid for by the Vale Treasury and the northern stores, be distributed to every commoner in the city before nightfall. Let no child starve under our watch. Harold slipped forward and unfurled an edict, reading the exact sums. 5,000 bushels from Gulltown, 3,000 from White Harbor, and a levy of 10% from the Red Wine Fleet. Below, merchants and dock workers stepped forward, relief etched on their soot-smeared faces. Second, Sansa continued, we must repair the city walls and restore its defenses, not for war, but to protect its people from raiders. I appoint Lord Garland Tyrell as master of the city's works, to oversee laborers drawn from the peasantry of Dorne and the Reach, published at fair wages. They will rebuild the harbor walls, mend the Windmill Hill gates, and replant the godswood within the city, for the old gods as well as the new. Nendas. A group of Dornish engineers bowed, and a cluster of Tyrell masons murmured assent. Sansa allowed herself a small nod. Third, she said, voice firm, those who committed war crimes must stand trial. Cersei will answer for her crimes before a tribunal of 7. Myself, my brother Robb, Lady Catelyn, Lady Lysa, Lord Hoster Tollet, Lord Merritt Grafton, and a representative chosen by the faith. I will not seat the High Septon until the trial concludes, so that justice is free from zealotry and corruption. Now, a hush again fell, broken only by the distant toll of bells. Sansa felt the eyes of the city upon her, fearful, hopeful, expectant. And finally, she intoned, we will send envoys to Dorne, the Iron Islands, and the Stormlands. Each kingdom must affirm its loyalty not to a person, but to the realm itself. Our new charter will bind all to common law, to mutual defense, and to the welfare of every vassal. Only then will I convene the full Great Council. Mashin. She sat, exhaustion mingling with relief. Robb rose and clapped thrice, a signal. The hall erupted. Cheers from northern lords, stiff bows from Vale knights, cautious applause from southern exiles. Outside, the noon sun broke through clouds, illuminating the hall in pale gold. Later, as the council dispersed, Sansa withdrew to her private solar, a chamber stripped bare of vanity, furnished only with maps, ledgers, and chairs for petitioners. Maesters and scribes worked by candlelight, copying her decrees onto vellum. Cersei sat bound to a chair across from Sansa's desk, her hair rumpled and face pale, defiance quenched by defeat. Sansa closed the door behind her, ensuring privacy. Your Grace, Sansa said, voice steady. We have questions. Cersei's gaze flicked from Sansa to the table where pamphlets lay. Witness statements, depositions from city guards, accounts of famine, lists of noble families stripped of lands. She inhaled, restraining her anger. Ask. And so, the trial began. A measured, solemn exchange that would span days. Sansa heard from guards who witnessed the Night of Pots, from dockmasters who concealed grain shipments for the Queen, from Septus who sheltered children hidden from ransom. Cersei's answers were clipped, defensive. But under the weight of truth, they faltered. Over the hearth, Sansa watched her, neither gloating nor compassionate, but resolute. Justice must be seen to be justice. By moonrise, Cersei's fate was sealed. Exile to Casterly Rock, stripped of titles and lands, her retinue disbanded. Jaime Lannister, who had arrived secretly offering terms, was permitted to flee to the west, bearing no sword but a promise never to return. The lion's roar was silenced, and in its place rose a new era. As Sansa closed the trial scrolls, she unfurled a final parchment, the Charter of the Seven Kingdoms. Its opening lines read, "We, the duly convened lords and ladies of the North, the Vale, the Riverlands, the Reach, and the Stormlands, in council, sworn beneath the Seven, do hereby ordain that the Seven Kingdoms be bound by common law, that the Iron Throne shall serve the realm and not the ruler, and that no crown shall stand without the consent of its people and their champions. So long as this charter stands, the realm endures." She laid quill to paper, affixing her wax seal beneath her name. Sansa of House Stark, Regent of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Vale, and Warden of the North. Outside the windows, the first stars appeared. From the courtyard came the low murmur of rebuilding, the clash of tools, the murmur of laborers, the distant hum of life rekindled. Sansa rose, smoothing her brocade skirts, and stepped into the cooling air of the battlements. Below, the city glimmered, a palace of stone and shadow, now stirring toward dawn. In that moment, she felt the weight of her vows, to uphold mercy without weakness, to wield justice without cruelty, to forge unity from discord. The Iron Throne might sit empty beneath her, but her true power lay in those oaths, spoken aloud in the great hall, etched in charter, engraved upon her soul. She whispered to the night, "For the realm," and beneath the quiet stars, Westeros began anew.